The government in Iran shows off internationally by investing in other countries who are poor, but in terms of investing in its own country and its own people, there's little that has been done in the last 30 years. And there's still people who are suffering from mines that have been implanted by the Iranian government and during the Iraq War and also during the insurgency and the fight by the Iranian Revolutionary Guards or the IRGC against the Kurdish oppositions that has so far brought about 50,000 innocent civilian deaths and many people who have been maimed and killed by mines that still are hunting people down. People in Iran, the Kurdish people in Iran, make about 17% of the Iranian population, but unfortunately and sadly about only 1% of the Iranian GDP is spent on the Kurdish areas. Despite having 17% of the population, 1% of that country's GDP goes toward the Kurdish areas. Agricultural is the main sector in Iranian Kurdistan that people depend on, and unfortunately there's no planning or programs available by the government for the large 12 million people population in Iranian Kurdistan. There are really no market for their products, and sometimes their product really go wasted, and there's really no planning by the government. And a lot of the factories, especially the sugar beet factories, that have actually gone bankrupt because of the lack of investments by the government. And Kurdish farmers who make up much of the Kurdish economy in that area are suffering badly as well, and that's because of the government discriminations, and that's despite the fact that in other parts of Iran, especially the central areas, there's huge investments in terms of agriculture and as well as industrial investments. In terms of safety and security, Kurds again face heavy challenges, and as I mentioned, the Iran-Iraq War had the major effect. The 2005 report by the UN Special Rapporteur on Adequate Housing stated that due to the Iran-Iraq War, that the testimony received, housing situation in Ilan province, the southern Iranian Kurdistan, which is one of the provinces in Iranian Kurdistan, with a large Kurdish population, were equally disturbing and indicated that post-war reconstruction efforts have been disproportionately slow and sufficient in this area. As you all are aware, the Mesopotamia and the areas where Kurds live right now has been this cradle of civilization, and there are many cultural sites that have been neglected. The government of Iran not only has done nothing to protect these valuable historical sites, but also through its agents and mercenaries has ransacked hundreds of precious archaeological sites and artifacts. Unfortunately, the UN Heritage Body has done little to pressure the Iranian government to act on these critical matters. The Iranian government, with its chauvinistic policies, places a lot of emphasis on the archaeological sites, heritage sites that actually are in the center, which are mainly Persian-dominated, but places little emphasis and importance on the archaeological sites in the other Kurdish areas, which are facing and have already, much of it has been already looted or they've been destroyed. And also that's another part that needs immediate attention. Honorable members of this hearing, the deep-rooted discrimination against Kurds has given rise to a generation of activists calling for greater respect for minorities and better protection of the human rights of all Iranians. Many of those activists have ended up in Iranian jails where there's little regards for the rights of the captives. So to begin with, Kurds in Iran are treated unfairly, they're treated very badly and very inhumanely. And once they end up in Iranian jails because of their activism to demand more cultural rights, more political rights, and more rights as individuals and as Iranian citizens, they are faced with torture, with imprisonments, and disappearances. So not only they are treated unfairly in many aspects that I mentioned, but also when they end up in Iranian jails, which I think is their condition is very grave now in Iran, and especially much of the Iranian political prisoners are actually made up of the minorities, and especially mainly Kurds. And as you know, you probably heard the reports. Right now, there are about 12, 13 people on death sentences because of being journalists, activists, and they are mainly, and most of them are Kurdish. The 1 million signature for equality, that was women's activists and movements, and mostly made up of the Kurdish women's activists, are actually facing a lot of hardship, and most of them are either sent away to other locations and other cities and areas, or they're spending their lifetime imprisonment, or sometimes 10 years or 5 years. But one thing that that I like to emphasize on is the condition of the prisoners in Iranian Kurdistan. In many of the prisoners in Iranian Kurdistan, the testimonies that have been giving, and a lot of people who actually been released from the Iranian prisons, there are indications that not only they face torture, not only they face other physical and psychological mistreatment, but they're also poisoned, sometimes intoxicated. So what happens when either by forceful and very inhumane active torture, they are sent to hospitals where they get strokes and very psychological disorders that end up die in Iranian jails, and we've seen many cases of people like this, or they're being so chronically ill that they're unable to really be kept in jail. So a lot of them actually are released, and they end up either being chronically ill outside, who are really useless to themselves or to families, or they die, or they continue to suffer from their illnesses that goes on. So I think right now, and a lot of witnesses have been done by other prisoners, that's a huge concern in Iranian Kurdistan, because there's not really a lot of monitoring that's been done by other agencies. For example, international media is present in Iran, about 300 media outlets that exist in Iran, but unfortunately they're prohibited from going to Iranian Kurdistan and other ethnic areas where there is quite a lot of unrest and quite a lot of human rights violation. For example, if a human rights body, whether it's through United Nations or other, if they're allowed to go to Iran, they're not allowed to go to the Kurdish prisons who are very badly managed, and captives are badly treated. But again, thanks to the activism, a lot of the political activists in Iran, especially people like Mohammad Sadiq Kaboudwan, who are spending 11 years in jail, sentenced 11 years in jail for just setting up a human rights organization. These active torture and mistreatment has widely been publicized, and a lot of international organizations are well aware of the conditions of the Iranian activists in general, and Kurdish in particular. And as we've seen in the last year, we've seen 2 reports done by Amnesty International and Human Rights Watch, 2 reports that are about 60, 70 pages on human rights in Iran, and that deserves a lot of respect, and it has to be looked at as a reflection of the activism by the Iranian Kurdish activists like Mohammad Sadiq Kaboudwan and others who are spending jail time because of due to their activism. In short, I would like to get I'll give more time for questions, then we can look at the situation more broadly. Lastly, the people of Iran, especially the Kurds of Iran, as well as other nationalities, have always thought peaceful means to bring about peace, freedom, and democracy to Iran. However, the Islamic Republic has brutally responded to its population's call for a democratic Iran, resulting in becoming world's worst human rights violators. I believe that Canada, as well as the international community, have an obligation to not only continuously condemn these gross human rights violations, but also take necessary measures to make sure that the government in Iran can only represent its people at the global stage if and only if it starts respecting its citizens' rights and freedoms. Furthermore, I call upon the government and the Parliament of Canada to continue to expose the Islamic Republic of Iran's appalling human rights records internationally, and remind Iran that remind Iran under the Islamic Republic that It has an obligation to promote and protect human rights and fundamental freedoms, and to fulfill the obligations that they've undertaken under the various international instruments. We also call upon to officially condemn the discriminatory policies against the Kurds of Iran and other nationalities in Iran, and call upon the government in Iran to eliminate, in law or in practice, all forms of discrimination based on religion, ethnic or linguistic grounds, and other human rights violations against persons belonging to national minorities. There are other venues that Canada can help. I've listed a few of them, and you have them in front of you. Thank you very much for listening to me, and I'm more than happy to answer your questions if you have any.
Thank you very much. What I propose to do now is to have one round of 7-minute questions and answers. That's 7 minutes, including both the question and the answer. Starting with the Liberals and the Bloc Québécois, then the New Democrats, then the Conservatives. After that, there will be 2 further questions, one each from the Liberals and Conservatives, with 5 minutes for the question and answer together. Mr. Silva, would you like to begin the questioning?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I want to begin by thanking our witness, Sharif Behruz, for his eloquent comments. And to state also my support, and I think the support of many of our members of our committee, of our deep concern for the way minority groups are treated in Iran and the human rights violation that continues in that country. It's the reason why we're having this particular study. We are very much concerned about acts of torture, discrimination in particular, in relation to the Kurdish people. I know that your Kurdish community and people have been persecuted, and their rights have been denied, not just in Iran but other countries as well. And it is important to also to speak about things that I believe that we don't always hear, and that is that there's also religious discrimination also against the Kurds, given the fact that most of them are Sunnis, denied to have mosques within their own country, the violation of their language, and of course, this is all in the backdrop of yesterday's Durban conference, where the president of Iran, Mahmoud Ahmadinejad, made a mockery of the conference by using it to spill out his hatred, his incitement to hate and genocide of the Jewish people. And it was extremely appalling, and so I think that it was a very wise decision that the government, in fact, did not participate in that Durban conference, and then many other countries as well did not participate, because it truly was a sad day for human rights when you had such a human rights violator going there to preach such hatred and using the international stage to do so. And I've always believed that there is a growing movement with the young people. I believe that last time I checked, almost half the population is under 25. It's a very young population that is in Iran. And I'm hoping that within that young population that has not been totally brainwashed by this Islamic theocratic regime, authoritarian regime, that they will in fact will be able to find a peaceful solution as well to remove this particular regime. And I wonder, from your contacts in the communities of the Kurdish communities that you have in Iran, what is the feelings amongst the young people? Do they see a sense of hope that there is possibility that they will be able to get rid of this regime, if there is a possibility that they will in fact work for peaceful means to in fact bring about change in Iran, because they are living in incredible hardships. But I'd like to hear what has been your contacts with the young people of Iran, and particularly the Kurdish people of Iran.
Well, first of all, thank you for your solidarity with the Iranian people, and as well as the national minorities. There's really no comment that I can make about the Durban conference and the statement that supposedly the so-called president of Iran has made in regards to the Jewish people, and it's quite disgraceful, and it's quite sad to hear that someone like Ahmadinejad to speak on behalf of the Iranian people, who are of a great civilization, who have respect for the people in the Middle East, all of the people in the Middle East, including the Jewish people, and it's quite sad that such an image is made of the proud Iranian people. I can assure you that a lot of people, including the youth that you talked about, and the young that you talked about, are very sad of the fact that such a regime represents them. But as you know, the Islamic Republic has been able to hold for 30 years due to these policies and to the repressive policies, and they have a repressive regime in every aspect of life, whether it's social,